What would you do in this situation? Han had a wife, Imi. Han loved Imi very much, but sadly Imi was diagnosed with a rare type of cancer and didn't have long to live. Luckily, there was a pharmacist who had invented a drug called psychbustium that could totally cure her. The pharmacist, though, owned all the rights to this medication and decided to sell it at a high markup in order to make a big profit. While it only cost £200 to make, he sold it for 10 times that amount, £2,000. Han didn't have enough money to pay such a high price, so Han tried fundraising to cover the costs. But with time running out, Han had only managed to gather £1,000, which wasn't enough to buy the medicine. Han begged the pharmacist to sell it at a reduced price, but the man refused. Desperate and running out of time, Han broke into the pharmacy after hours and stole the drug. Was this a right or wrong thing to do? Why? What would have you done? Maybe write down your answer, only a sentence or two, and we'll see in the video what a researcher called Kohlberg would say about you. Psychboost.com, over 170 videos to help you with your qualification, and Patreon supporters can access bonus resources, tutorial videos, and the Discord channel. In this video, we're considering cognitive explanations for offending behaviour. So of course, when it's a cognitive explanation for anything, it's about internal mental processes, how our brain deals with information from the world. And particularly for this video, how the brain processes moral decisions. Now, because of course you are highly moral, you're less likely to be a criminal. Or maybe not. This is Kohlberg. In 1969, he described his theory of moral reasoning, suggesting there are 3 levels that we can pass through during our moral development. As we progress through each level, our moral reasoning becomes more mature and sophisticated. But not everyone passes through all 3 stages. According to Kohlberg, most criminals don't ever reach the higher levels of moral reasoning. They're likely to be stuck at the first pre-conventional level. At this level, people only consider how their actions will affect them personally. And there are 2 stages to this level. In the first punishment orientation stage, people think correct behaviour is whatever they won't get in trouble for. So they might commit the crime if they think they can get away with it. In the second stage, reward orientation, correct behaviour is simply whatever is the most rewarding. If the reward outweighs any potential punishment, a criminal might feel that the financial rewards or even status rewards are worth the punishment for the crime. Now, there are 2 more levels to Kohlberg's level of moral reasoning. But as we're focused on criminal behaviour, and that is people who are in the first level, we can focus a little less in the second 2. But we may want to say that criminal behaviour is less likely if people are at the conventional level, when they think about what is best for their own personal relationships and society in general before taking action. And also less likely if they are in the third post-conventional level, when they actually consider the moral principles, what is truly right and truly wrong. But even though we don't need to focus on the second 2 levels when writing about offending behaviour, you may want to know about the second 2 levels and what Kohlberg would think of your moral reasoning. But if you don't want to understand Kohlberg at a slightly deeper level and just want to skip to the evaluations, you can jump to this point. So let's go back to the scenario. This is a slightly edited version of one scenario that Kohlberg used to measure the level of moral reasoning of his subjects. Pause the video and consider which of these statements is closest to what you would do. What I want to show you is actually whether you would or you wouldn't steal doesn't make the biggest difference in the stage that you're at, but it's all about the thought process that you go through to get your answer. Well, as you can guess, I would steal, as I don't think I would get caught if I was careful, and I would steal as I would keep my wife around and she makes a great sandwich, are both pre-conventional. The focus is on how the actions affect you personally. Interesting, that means I wouldn't steal as I think they would probably catch me and I don't want to go to prison, and I wouldn't steal because I love my wife but she isn't worth going to prison for, are also pre-conventional moral decisions. Criminals are likely to be in pre-conventional as they might overestimate the rewards and underestimate the risks that they're going to get caught. At the conventional level, we accept society as an authority, but we can also split the level into 2 stages. So in what's now the third good intention stage, you're worried about what others think of you. So you conform to society's expectations. You may say, I wouldn't because I don't want to be thought of as a thief. But the counter-argument is, I would steal because I don't want people to think that I let my wife down when she really needed me. In stage 4, it's social obedience. You're much more likely to just follow the law because you consider the functioning of society as important. In this stage, you're most likely to say, I wouldn't steal because it's against the law, and if everyone broke the law, society would fall apart. Now, Kohlberg suggests that around 90% of people are not really going to get beyond stage 4, and most people are generally law-abiding. But we do still have one level to go, including 2 stages. In the post-conventional level, you consider your own personal ethical principles and will obey or disobey depending on deeply felt beliefs concerning some laws being just and some being unjust. Stage 5 is the social contract view, considering that laws should be in the best interests of members of society. And in this case, you may break the law on the principle that the law isn't functioning. I will steal as my wife's right to life is greater than his right to more money. Or even, I won't steal, but we will campaign to change the law for access to drugs for people who can't afford. Stage 6 is universal ethics. In this stage, before making a decision, there is an abstract level of reasoning on the true nature of justice. And people in this stage may consider that true morality requires disobedience of laws not grounded in justice. Someone might say at this stage, a life is more precious than property, and if I'm breaking the law in getting the medicine, then the law is wrong. Or if they're going to obey the law, a person's right to their own property is the fundamental right. Laws that protect that right are just and should be obeyed. I mean, you may or may not agree with those examples, but hopefully you can see the logical reasoning there. I think one good example of stage 6 moral reasoning could be Rosa Parks disobeying the segregationist rules on seating. But if you can think of any other examples, pop them in the comments. Cognitive distortions. So when learning about cognitive explanations for criminal behaviour, we also need to consider cognitive distortions. This means when our mind fails to accurately perceive the true reality of the world around us. Because this thinking is fundamentally irrational, we totally misunderstand the motivations and reality of our own and other people's behaviour. And importantly, as we're considering offending behaviour, we might respond with criminal acts, and we might feel justified in our response because of our cognitive distortion. One example is hostile attribution bias. We observe other people's behaviour, and we make assumptions or inferences about their internal mental states. Hostile attribution bias is when we automatically assume that the other person has had negative intentions.
What are you, mate? Yeah, you over there. Are you looking over here with a bit of a stare? What's your problem, mate? You want to sort this out? I'll come right over there and I'll bang you out.
And that's kind of exactly what I mean. For some people, just a simple look can be interpreted as an aggressive act. Or maybe accidentally bumping into someone in a crowded room as a physical attack. The misread of intention escalates into an aggressive and potentially violent response. A second distortion is minimalisation. This is about how we interpret our own behaviour and the results of that behaviour. When we minimise, we see this behaviour as less serious than it really is. We might say their actions didn't really harm the victim, or that the victim was in some way complicit, or even was completely responsible for what happened to them. This process is an attempt by the criminal to feel less guilty about what they did. Evaluations. Support for Kohlberg's ideas comes from Holland and Palmer. They compared the moral reasoning of delinquents and non-delinquents using an 11-question interview. All the participants were between 13 and 22. And it was found that the male offenders had lower moral reasoning on 10 out of the 11 questions, suggesting a moral deficit in criminals. There is a big problem, though, with Kohlberg's research and the theory that he developed from it. And that is, it's based on responses to hypothetical dilemma questions. Social desirability pressures means it's unlikely people will answer honestly, even if they actually knew what they would really do in the situation. So perhaps generalization to real instances of offending is pretty limited. I mean, one example of this is if I asked people if, when they were ordered to by a scientist, would they give what they thought would be a deadly shock to another person? I think most, if not everybody asked, would say no. And we know that 2/3 of those people would be completely wrong. Another problem with Kohlberg is gender bias. He used an all-male sample to develop his theory, assuming it would apply to women. This evaluation does keep coming up, doesn't it? Well, minimizing potential gender differences is beta bias. But interestingly, when women were eventually tested, they actually appeared less morally developed than men, which doesn't match the fact that men make up most of the prison population. A researcher called Gillian looked at Kohlberg's work and suggested that Kohlberg's theory is focusing on a male ideal of justice, minimizing the value of females focusing on the importance of caring. But a positive, if we accept there is a link between cognitive processes like hostile attribution bias and minimization and offending behaviour, we can develop cognitive behavioural programs to challenge irrational thinking, programs like anger management. This could reduce reoffending and hopefully reduce crime and associated harms to society. Here is a real forensic exam question on cognitive explanations. How about you give it a go? I want to give a real quick thank you to everybody who supports the channel over on Patreon. And a quick reminder, if you're a PsychBoost patron at the neuron level and above, you can access 6 forensic tutorial videos over on psychboost.com. I'll talk you through a model answer for the exam questions and give you some general tips. Stand-Up's patrons can access a printable forensic poster, a 90-question quiz sheet covering the unit, and an essay table. And for everyone else, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the videos released right up to your exams. And I'll see you in the next PsychBoost video. Differential Association Theory.